The dust hadn't even settled from the morning PT when Colonel Morrison stepped into that circle. 310 soldiers formed a perfect ring around the training pit, their boots creating a wall of anticipation on the packed Georgia clay. Sergeant Maya Chun stood in the center, her uniform already marked with sweat and determination. What happened next would echo through Fort Benning for decades. Some said it was the day a colonel learned respect. Others called it the moment the Army changed forever. But Maya? She just called it Tuesday. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn air at Fort Benning carried the weight of August. Humidity, thick enough to taste before the sun crested the tree line. Maya Chun had been awake since 0430, the same as every morning for the past 8 years of her military career. Her boots made soft impressions in the dew-soaked grass as she walked the perimeter of the training complex, checking equipment and mentally preparing for another day of proving herself in a world that questioned her presence at every turn. The obstacle course stretched across 12 acres of carefully maintained Georgia soil, each station designed to test not just physical capability, but mental resilience. Maya knew every bolt, every rope, every measured distance by heart. She had run these courses as a recruit, mastered them as a specialist, and now supervised them as a staff sergeant in the Army's Combat Arms Training Center. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had become the standard others struggled to meet. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she tested the tension on climbing ropes, checking each knot with the kind of attention that separated competent soldiers from exceptional ones. The rope fibers were coarse against her palms, weathered by countless hands but still reliable. Everything in this place was built to last, to endure the punishment of training that separated those who belonged from those who didn't. The sound of approaching footsteps made her pause, not from startlement but from recognition. Lieutenant. Colonel Harrison's morning routine brought him through this section at precisely 0515 every day, his clipboard thick with the day's training schedules and evaluation criteria. Maya had learned to read the subtle signs in his posture that indicated whether the day would bring routine instruction or something more challenging. "Morning, Sergeant Chun." His voice carried the formal courtesy that marked professional military interaction, but Maya caught the slight edge that suggested today's agenda held complications. "Good morning, sir. The course is ready for the 0600 rotation." Her response was equally measured, revealing nothing of the calculations already running through her mind about potential scenarios and required adjustments. Harrison nodded, his eyes scanning the equipment with the thoroughness of someone who understood that preparation prevented problems. "We've got visitors today. Colonel Morrison from the Pentagon is conducting a comprehensive review of mixed-gender training protocols. He'll be observing all morning sessions and conducting individual evaluations." The name carried weight that settled in Maya's stomach like a stone. Morrison's reputation preceded him through the Army's informal networks, the kind of information that traveled between soldiers who understood the difference between official policy and practical reality. His views on women in combat roles were well documented through congressional testimonies and leaked memos that painted a clear picture of his position. "Understood, sir? Standard protocols?" "Standard for us. Morrison may have different ideas about what constitutes appropriate evaluation criteria." Harrison's tone remained neutral, but Maya caught the subtle warning embedded in his careful phrasing. The morning light was beginning to filter through the pine trees that bordered the training area, casting long shadows across the obstacle course. Maya used those shadows to gauge time and distance, skills that had become second nature through years of navigation training. The familiar landscape took on different significance. Knowing it would serve as the backdrop for scrutiny that went beyond routine performance assessment. Other instructors began arriving as the clock approached 0545, each settling into their assigned stations with the quiet efficiency of professionals preparing for another day's work. Maya exchanged brief nods with Sergeant Williams at the rope climb station and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez at the combat simulation area. No words were necessary. They all understood that today would test more than the trainees' abilities. The first group of soldiers appeared at the course entrance, their formation tight and their faces showing the focused determination of individuals who knew their performance would be measured and recorded. Maya recognized most of them from previous rotations, soldiers who had progressed through the training pipeline and were now facing the final evaluations that would determine their assignment possibilities. Among them, she noticed several female soldiers whose posture carried the particular kind of readiness that came from knowing they were representing more than just themselves. Maya understood that feeling intimately, the weight of being watched not just as an individual but as a symbol of capability or limitation, depending on the observer's preconceptions. The sound of vehicles approaching from the main road indicated the arrival of the evaluation team. Maya checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that every aspect of her station met the exacting standards she had maintained throughout her career. Her hands were steady as she adjusted the timing equipment and verified the safety protocols that governed her section of the course. Colonel Morrison's staff car pulled into the designated parking area with military precision, followed by 2 additional vehicles carrying his evaluation team. Maya watched from her position without appearing to observe, a skill that had served her well in situations where direct attention would be unwelcome or counterproductive. Morrison emerged from the vehicle with the bearing of someone accustomed to command and the expectation of immediate compliance with his presence. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his insignia positioned with geometric precision, and his expression carried the neutral assessment of someone conducting business rather than building relationships. The evaluation team spread out across the training area with practiced efficiency, each member taking positions that would allow comprehensive observation of the morning's activities. Maya noted their positions and adjusted her own awareness accordingly, understanding that every action would be scrutinized and interpreted through whatever lens Morrison chose to apply. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached Morrison with the courtesy due his rank, but Maya detected the subtle tension in his shoulders that indicated careful navigation of political undercurrents. The conversation between the 2 officers was too distant to overhear, but their body language suggested a discussion of protocols and expectations that went beyond simple observation. The first training group formed up at the starting line, their equipment checked and their attitudes focused on the tasks ahead. Maya took her position at the rope climbing station, her role clearly defined by years of experience and the specific requirements of the evaluation process. The familiar weight of responsibility settled across her shoulders like a well-fitted pack. Morrison's attention swept across the training area with the methodical approach of someone cataloging details for later analysis. When his gaze reached Maya's station, it lingered with the kind of assessment that went beyond professional curiosity. She met his look directly, her expression neutral and her posture reflecting the confidence that came from absolute preparation. Morning air was warming as the sun climbed higher, burning off the dew and revealing the red clay surface that would test every soldier's ability to maintain footing under challenging conditions. Maya had trained on this surface in every weather condition, understanding how moisture, temperature, and wear patterns affected performance and safety. Her station commanded a view of the entire course, positioning her where she could observe not just the soldiers under evaluation, but also the evaluators themselves. This perspective had taught her to read the subtle dynamics that influenced official assessments, the unspoken factors that could determine career trajectories and assignment opportunities. The radio crackled with the routine communications that coordinated training activities, each transmission adding to the familiar soundtrack of military preparation. Maya listened with part of her attention while maintaining primary focus on the approaching moment. when observation would become action, and preparation would be tested by reality. Morrison approached her station with deliberate steps, his evaluation team trailing at a respectful distance. Maya came to attention with the precision that had been drilled into her since basic training, her acknowledgement of his rank automatic. "And correct. Sergeant Chun, I presume." His voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Yes, sir." "Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, Combat Arms Training Center. I've reviewed your file. Impressive record, though I have some questions about the sustainability of current policies regarding mixed-gender training protocols." His tone suggested that her record was less important than the point he intended to make. Maya maintained her professional demeanor while calculating the implications of his statement. Years of navigating similar conversations had taught her to listen not just to the words, but to the assumptions and expectations they revealed. The training whistle sounded across the course, signaling the beginning of the morning's evaluation cycle. Maya's attention shifted to the soldiers beginning their approach to her station, their movements displaying the competence and determination that represented months of preparation and training. Morrison stepped closer to observe, his presence adding weight to an evaluation that would have been routine under normal circumstances. Maya felt the familiar surge of focus that accompanied high-stakes performance, the sharpening of awareness that turned routine into something more significant. First soldier reached the rope climb, and Maya began the process that had become second nature through thousands of repetitions. Her voice carried clear instructions while her eyes tracked performance details that would determine success or failure. Every movement was measured against standards that had been refined through decades of military training doctrine, but she was aware, with increasing certainty, that this morning would demand more than technical expertise. The weight of Morrison's attention and the implications of his presence suggested that today would test not just the soldiers under evaluation, but the instructors responsible for their training. Maya had faced such tests before, and she was ready for whatever form this one might take. Morrison's clipboard held more than training schedules. Maya caught glimpses of personnel files, policy documents, and what appeared to be statistical analyses as he positioned himself at the optimal observation point. His team dispersed with military efficiency, each member carrying recording equipment that suggested this evaluation would be documented in exhaustive detail. The rope climbing station had been Maya's specialty since her days as a drill sergeant at Fort Jackson. She understood the biomechanics of efficient climbing, the psychological factors that separated successful attempts from failures, and the subtle coaching techniques that could push a struggling soldier across the threshold of success. More importantly, she knew how to maintain safety while pushing performance standards to their legitimate limits. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Private Rodriguez approached the rope with the determined expression of someone who had practiced this climb hundreds of times. Maya assessed his grip strength, his approach angle, and the slight tremor in his left hand that suggested either nervousness or fatigue from the previous stations. Her evaluation began before he touched the rope. Standard technique, Rodriguez. Control your breathing and trust your training. Her voice carried the authority of experience without the harshness that could undermine confidence. Morrison stepped closer, his attention focused not on Rodriguez's technique, but on Maya's instruction methods. She was aware of his scrutiny, but refused to alter her approach. 8 years of successful training outcomes had validated her methods, and she would not compromise proven techniques for political considerations. Rodriguez began his ascent with smooth, controlled movements. Maya tracked his progress against the stopwatch, noting the efficiency of his hand-over-hand technique and the proper use of his legs to support his body weight. His breathing remained steady, indicating good cardiovascular conditioning and proper mental focus. Maintain your rhythm, Maya called up to him. "You're ahead of pace." The encouragement was calculated to boost confidence without creating complacency. Maya had learned that the right words at the right moment could be the difference between success and failure, particularly when soldiers were performing under observation pressure. Morrison made notes on his clipboard, his writing rapid and focused. Maya wondered what aspects of the interaction he was recording, whether his documentation focused on training effectiveness or on predetermined conclusions about gender integration policies. Rodriguez reached the top marker with 2 seconds to 2 seconds to coach tunes of Chua Tuzicum policies. Spare, his descent controlled and professional. Maya recorded his time and performance notes with the same attention to detail she applied to every evaluation. Excellence required consistency, and consistency demanded unwavering standards regardless of who was watching. "Outstanding work, Rodriguez. Report to the next station." Morrison approached as the next soldier prepared for his attempt. "Sergeant, I'd like to understand your coaching philosophy. What techniques do you employ to maximize performance outcomes?" The question seemed straightforward, but Maya detected the underlying current that suggested her answer would be measured against preconceived notions about appropriate military training methods. She chose her words carefully, drawing on the professional vocabulary that had served her well in previous challenging conversations. "Sir, I focus on biomechanical efficiency combined with psychological preparation. Each soldier receives individualized coaching based on their physical capabilities and mental readiness. The goal is to optimize performance within safety parameters while building confidence for real-world applications." Morrison's expression remained neutral, but Maya caught the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated her response had triggered some internal calculation. She continued her explanation, aware that every word was being evaluated for compliance with his unstated expectations. "The rope climb simulates critical combat skills, including emergency evacuation scenarios, obstacle negotiation under stress, and upper body strength requirements for equipment handling. My approach emphasizes practical application rather than arbitrary physical benchmarks." "And how do you account for physiological differences between male and female soldiers in your training protocols?" The question arrived with the precision of a guided missile, aimed at the heart of the debate that had brought Morrison to Fort Benning. Maya had fielded similar questions throughout her career, but the context of this formal evaluation added weight that demanded careful navigation. "Sir, I evaluate each soldier based on their individual capabilities and improvement potential. Standards remain consistent while coaching techniques adapt to optimize each person's performance within those standards. Results demonstrate that soldiers of all backgrounds can achieve required competency levels when provided appropriate instruction and support." Private Thompson stepped up to the rope, her female soldier's uniform marking her as a test case for whatever thesis Morrison was developing. Maya conducted the same assessment process, noting Thompson's excellent upper body strength and the focused determination that had carried her through previous training cycles. Morrison's attention intensified as Thompson began her climb, his observation shifting from casual monitoring to active scrutiny. Maya maintained her standard coaching approach, refusing to alter her methods based on the gender of the soldier or the presence of evaluators with political agendas. "Steady pace, Thompson. Use your legs to support the climb." Thompson's technique was textbook perfect, her movements economical and controlled. Maya had worked with her during previous training rotations and knew her capabilities exceeded many of her male counterparts. Thompson represented the kind of soldier who validated mixed gender training through performance rather than policy arguments. The climb proceeded flawlessly, Thompson reaching the top marker with time to spare and descending with the controlled confidence of someone who had mastered the required skills. Maya recorded her performance with satisfaction, knowing that objective excellence spoke louder than subjective opinions. Morrison approached Thompson directly as she completed her equipment, Check. Private, how do you feel about training alongside male soldiers? Do you believe current integration policies adequately address the unique challenges you face? Maya tensed slightly, recognizing the loaded nature of the question and the potential for Thompson's response to be used in ways that might not serve her best interests. Military protocol prevented Maya from intervening directly, but she positioned herself where Thompson could see her supportive expression. Thompson's response reflected the professionalism that had earned her respect throughout the training program. Sir, I focus on meeting the same standards as every other soldier. The training prepares us for mission requirements, and I'm confident in my ability to contribute effectively to any unit I'm assigned to. Morrison made additional notes, his expression revealing nothing about whether Thompson's answer supported or contradicted his evaluation framework. Maya recognized the technique of gathering information that could be selectively quoted to support predetermined conclusions, a political skill that differed significantly from military leadership capabilities. The morning rotation continued with mechanical precision, each soldier completing their evaluation while Morrison's team documented every interaction. Maya maintained her professional standards, while growing increasingly aware that she was participating in something that extended far beyond routine training. Assessment. Sergeant Williams rotated over from his station during a brief lull between evaluation groups. His expression carried the subtle warning of someone who had been monitoring the overall situation and recognized developing complications. How's it going over here? His casual tone masked the genuine concern that prompted his check-in. Standard evaluations. Colonel Morrison is conducting comprehensive observation of training protocols. Maya's response was equally casual while conveying her awareness of the underlying tensions. Morrison's attention shifted to their brief conversation, his interest in instructor interactions suggesting that peer relationships were also part of his evaluation criteria. Maya wondered whether he was looking for evidence of coordination that might undermine his assessment objectivity, or searching for interpersonal dynamics that could support broader conclusions about unit cohesion. The next group of soldiers formed up at the starting line, their equipment checks completed and their focus shifting to performance mode. Maya recognized several faces from previous training cycles, soldiers who had progressed through the program, and were now facing the final evaluations that would determine their military, occupational specialty assignments. Among them stood Corporal Martinez, whose journey through the training pipeline had been marked by steady improvement and the kind of determination that separated successful soldiers from those who struggled with military demands. Maya had worked with her extensively, watching her transform from someone who barely met minimum requirements to a soldier who consistently exceeded performance standards. Morrison positioned himself for optimal observation as Martinez approached the rope station. Maya sensed that this evaluation carried additional significance. Though she couldn't determine whether Morrison's interest stemmed from Martinez's gender, her performance history, or some other factor that fit his assessment framework. Standard approach, Martinez. You've got this. Maya's encouragement reflected genuine confidence in Martinez's abilities, but she was aware that Morrison might interpret her supportive coaching style as evidence of reduced standards or inappropriate assistance. The political minefield of gender integration. Debates often twisted professional competence into ideological ammunition. Martinez began her climb with the smooth efficiency that reflected months of dedicated training. Her technique demonstrated mastery of the biomechanical principles Maya had taught, and her pace indicated excellent cardiovascular conditioning. Maya tracked her progress with professional satisfaction while remaining alert to Morrison's documentation methods. The rope climb became a demonstration of training effectiveness, with Martinez executing each movement with precision that validated the instruction she had received. Maya had invested significant time in helping her develop proper technique, and the results spoke clearly about the value of individualized coaching approaches. Morrison stepped closer to the rope, his proximity allowing detailed observation of Martinez's technique and Maya's coaching methods. Maya maintained her standard approach while adapting to the increased scrutiny, demonstrating the same professional consistency that had characterized her entire military career. Excellent form, Martinez. Maintain that rhythm through the top. Section. The coaching guidance reflected technical expertise rather than gender-based accommodation, a distinction that Maya hoped would be apparent to any objective observer. Her methods had been refined through years of successful training outcomes, and she refused to compromise proven techniques for political considerations that had nothing to do with military effectiveness. Martinez completed her climb with outstanding performance, her time placing her in the top quartile of evaluated soldiers regardless of gender demographics. Maya recorded her results with the same attention to detail applied to every evaluation, knowing that objective documentation provided the best defense against subjective interpretation. As the morning progressed, Maya became increasingly aware that Morrison's evaluation extended beyond individual soldier performance to encompass broader questions about training methodologies, instructor capabilities, and policy implementation effectiveness. She was participating in an assessment that would influence decisions affecting thousands of military personnel. The weight of that responsibility settled across her shoulders like equipment she had trained to carry. Maya had spent 8 years proving herself capable of meeting every challenge the Army presented, and she would not allow political pressures to undermine her professional integrity or compromise the training that prepared soldiers for real-world missions. Morrison's clipboard grew thicker with documentation as each soldier completed their evaluation. Maya wondered what patterns he was identifying, what conclusions he was drawing, and how those findings would be presented in whatever report would emerge from this comprehensive assessment. She could only control her own performance and maintain the standards that had served her throughout her military career. The shift happened during the water break between training rotations. Morrison dismissed his documentation team with a gesture that suggested their formal observation period had concluded, but Maya noticed he remained positioned near her station. His clipboard was closed now, replaced by a more direct focus that felt distinctly different from professional evaluation. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison approached with 2 cups of coffee, offering one to Morrison in a gesture that appeared diplomatic, but carried undertones Maya couldn't quite identify. Their conversation was conducted in the low tones that indicated discussion of sensitive matters, and Maya caught fragments that suggested disagreement about evaluation protocols. Exceptional instructor ratings across all demographics. Harrison's voice carried the careful modulation of someone making a factual argument against unstated opposition. Morrison's response was too quiet to overhear, but Harrison's posture shifted in a way that suggested the conversation was not proceeding as he had hoped. Maya continued her equipment maintenance while tracking the exchange through peripheral observation, a skill that had proven valuable in navigating military politics throughout her career. Sergeant First Class Davidson arrived at Maya's station with the next group of trainees, his expression carrying a subtle warning that indicated awareness of developing complications. Davidson had served as Maya's mentor during her early years at Fort Benning, and his presence suggested either routine rotation or deliberate positioning to provide support if needed. "Afternoon rotation is ready for evaluation," Davidson reported, his tone professional, but his eyes conveying information that couldn't be spoken directly. Maya acknowledged with a nod that indicated both understanding of the official message and recognition of the unspoken context. The afternoon group represented the final evaluations for soldiers who had struggled with previous attempts, their last opportunity to meet standards before facing possible reassignment or additional training requirements. Morrison approached. As the group formed up, his attention focused on Maya with an intensity that went beyond routine observation. "Sergeant Chun, I'd like to discuss some concerns that have emerged during this morning's evaluation process." The phrasing was carefully neutral, but Maya recognized the formal language that preceded challenging conversations. She maintained her professional demeanor while calculating the implications of Morrison's shift from observer to active participant in her training responsibilities. "Certainly, sir. How can I address your concerns?" Morrison's response came with the measured delivery of someone who had prepared his talking points in advance. "I've observed what appears to be inconsistent application of evaluation standards, particularly regarding coaching intensity and performance expectations. These variations seem to correlate with trainee demographics in ways that suggest systemic accommodation rather than uniform standards." Maya felt the familiar tension that accompanied accusations couched in bureaucratic language, the kind of challenge that required precise navigation between professional defense and insubordination. Her response needed to address his concerns, while maintaining the integrity of her training methods. "Sir, my coaching techniques are individualized based on each soldier's learning style and physical capabilities, but the performance standards remain consistent across all demographics. I can provide detailed documentation of evaluation criteria and scoring methodologies if that would be helpful." "That won't be necessary. What I'm more interested in is your personal philosophy regarding the integration of women into combat training programs. Do you believe current policies adequately prepare female soldiers for the physical and psychological demands they'll face in operational environments?" The question shifted from professional evaluation to ideological interrogation, a transition that Maya recognized as dangerous territory. Morrison was no longer assessing her training effectiveness, but probing for statements that could be used to support predetermined conclusions about gender integration policies. Maya chose her words with the precision of someone diffusing an unexploded ordnance. "Sir, my focus is on ensuring that every soldier under my instruction develops the skills and confidence necessary to succeed in their assigned roles. Individual performance outcomes demonstrate the effectiveness of appropriate training methodologies, regardless of demographic factors." Morrison stepped closer, his proximity creating an intimidation dynamic that felt distinctly unprofessional. Maya maintained her position while noting the breach of appropriate social distance, filing the information as potential evidence of escalating confrontation. "Sergeant, I think you're being deliberately evasive. I'm asking for your honest assessment of whether women can realistically meet the same combat readiness standards as their male counterparts without compromising unit effectiveness or mission success." The question was a trap designed to force Maya into either contradicting official Army policy or making statements that could be characterized as admissions of reduced standards. She recognized the technique from congressional hearings where military leaders had been maneuvered into politically damaging positions, regardless of their actual responses. "Sir, my experience training soldiers of all backgrounds demonstrates that individual capability varies widely within all demographic groups. The Army's evaluation standards are designed to identify soldiers who can perform required tasks effectively, and my role is to help each trainee reach those standards through appropriate instruction and support." Morrison's expression hardened in a way that suggested Maya's diplomatic responses were frustrating his attempt to generate quotable controversy. His next approach carried the edge of someone shifting tactics when initial strategies proved ineffective. "Perhaps we should test your confidence in these training methods. I'd like to see a practical demonstration of combat readiness evaluation using current protocols." Maya sensed the dangerous shift from theoretical discussion to practical challenge. But military protocol required compliance with superior officer directives unless they clearly violated regulations or safety standards. Morrison's request fell within his authority as an evaluating officer, regardless of his underlying motivations. "What specific demonstration would you like me to conduct, sir?" Morrison's pause suggested he was formulating his response carefully, weighing options that would serve his evaluation objectives. "I want to observe hand-to-hand combat assessment procedures. Set up a demonstration using standard Army combatives evaluation criteria. The request carried implications that extended beyond routine training assessment. Hand-to-hand combat evaluations involve direct physical confrontation under controlled conditions, with outcomes that could be interpreted as validation or contradiction of integration policies depending on the observer's perspective. Maya noted that Davidson had moved closer during the conversation, positioning himself where he could observe without appearing to eavesdrop. His presence suggested awareness that the situation was developing beyond routine evaluation parameters and might require witness documentation or intervention. Sir, combatives evaluations require specific safety protocols and qualified medical personnel on standby. I'd need to coordinate with the appropriate support staff to ensure proper procedures are followed. Morrison's response came with the sharp tone of someone whose authority was being questioned. Sergeant, I'm familiar with Army safety requirements. I want to see how you conduct combat readiness assessments under current integration policies. Are you suggesting that these evaluations can't be conducted without extensive preparation? The challenge was carefully constructed to make any reasonable safety concern appear as reluctance to demonstrate training effectiveness. Maya recognized the manipulation but found herself in a position where protocol demanded compliance with what appeared to be a legitimate superior officer directive. No, sir. I can conduct a combatives demonstration using standard evaluation procedures. I'll need a few minutes to establish the appropriate safety parameters and ensure proper oversight. Morrison's satisfaction was visible in this slight relaxation of his posture, suggesting that Maya's agreement to the demonstration served whatever strategic objective had motivated his request. Maya wondered what outcome he anticipated and how he planned to use the results in his overall evaluation report. Davidson approached as Maya began setting up the designated combat evaluation area, his assistance appearing routine while providing opportunity for discreet communication. You sure about this, Maya? Something feels off about the whole setup. Maya appreciated his concern while recognizing that backing down from Morrison's challenge would be interpreted as admission of inadequacy, regardless of the reasonable safety considerations that made her cautious. It's within his authority as an evaluating officer. We'll follow standard procedures and document everything properly. The combat evaluation circle was marked out according to Army regulation specifications, with appropriate spacing for safety and observation. Maya verified that the ground conditions met requirements for controlled combat assessment and confirmed that basic medical support was immediately available through the training facility's standard personnel. Morrison positioned himself at the optimal observation point, his attention focused on the preparation procedures with the intensity of someone whose expectations were riding on the demonstration's outcome. Maya sensed that this moment represented the culmination of whatever evaluation thesis he had developed during his morning observations. Several off-duty soldiers had gathered at the periphery, drawn by word that an unusual evaluation was taking place. Maya noted their presence while focusing on the procedural requirements that would ensure the demonstration met professional standards, regardless of political implications. What specific combat scenario would you like demonstrated, sir? Maya asked, hoping to establish clear parameters that would prevent the evaluation from exceeding appropriate boundaries. Morrison's response carried the confidence of someone who had anticipated this moment. I want to see a realistic assessment of defensive capabilities against a superior opponent. Standard military confrontation scenario where size and strength advantages would be typical of real-world combat conditions. Maya understood immediately that Morrison was proposing to serve as her opponent in the demonstration, a scenario that would place her in direct physical confrontation with a superior officer, whose motivations appeared to extend beyond professional evaluation. The situation had evolved from training assessment to personal challenge. The implications were clear. Morrison intended to use physical confrontation to demonstrate what he perceived as the inadequacy of women in combat roles, with Maya serving as his proof of concept. Her success or failure would be interpreted through his predetermined framework, regardless of the actual outcome. Maya looked at the growing circle of observers, realizing that whatever happened next would be witnessed by dozens of soldiers and would inevitably become part of Fort Benning's institutional memory. Morrison had maneuvered her into a position where she had no choice but to participate in what amounted to a public test of her capabilities and, by extension, the validity of gender integration policies. Davidson's expression reflected growing concern about the direction of events, but military hierarchy prevented him from directly intervening in what appeared to be a legitimate superior officer evaluation. Maya was on her own in navigating whatever challenge Morrison had constructed. Afternoon sun beat down on the training area as Maya prepared for a confrontation that would determine more than just her individual standing. Morrison's challenge represented a test of everything she had worked to achieve, and everything she represented to the soldiers who looked to her as proof that excellence transcended demographic boundaries. Maya centered herself in the combat evaluation circle, knowing that the next few minutes would define not just her career, but her legacy. Morrison stepped forward with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome was predetermined in his favor, unaware that he was about to learn the difference between assumption and reality. The circle of soldiers had grown to over 200, their formations creating an amphitheater of witnesses around the combat demonstration area. Word had spread through the base with the efficiency that marked significant events, drawing personnel from across the training complex to observe what many sensed would be more than routine evaluation. Morrison removed his service jacket with deliberate ceremony, folding it with the precision that marked every aspect of his military bearing. Underneath, his physical conditioning was evident in the cut of his uniform and the confident way he carried his 6'2" frame. At 53, he maintained the fitness standards that had carried him through airborne training and multiple combat deployments. Maya assessed her opponent with the same tactical analysis she applied to any combat scenario. Morrison outweighed her by at least 60 pounds and possessed a significant reach advantage that would favor him in grappling situations. His movement pattern suggested someone comfortable with physical confrontation, probably enhanced by regular combatives training that maintained his competitive edge. Standard Army combatives rules apply, Morrison announced to the assembled observers, his voice carrying the authority of someone conducting official business. This demonstration will evaluate defensive capabilities under realistic operational conditions where physical disadvantages must be overcome through technique and training. The announcement was carefully worded to frame the confrontation as educational rather than personal, but Maya recognized the political calculation underlying his language. Morrison was creating documentation that would support whatever conclusions he intended to draw from the encounter, regardless of its actual outcome. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison pushed through the crowd with the urgent stride of someone who had just learned about developments beyond his control. His expression reflected the alarm of a commanding officer discovering that his evaluation had escalated into unplanned territory with significant potential for negative consequences. Colonel Morrison, I wasn't aware that physical demonstration was part of today's evaluation protocol. Perhaps we should review the safety parameters and ensure appropriate medical coverage before proceeding. Morrison's response came with the flat certainty of senior rank exercising prerogative. Colonel Harrison, this demonstration falls within my evaluation authority as designated by Pentagon directive. The safety protocols in place for regular combatives training are adequate for this assessment. Harrison's position was compromised by the chain of command that placed Morrison's evaluation mission above his facility command authority. Maya watched the exchange while recognizing that she would receive no institutional protection from whatever Morrison had planned for the next few minutes. Master Sergeant Kelly appeared at the edge of the circle, his presence indicating that senior enlisted leadership was monitoring the situation. Kelly had served with Maya during her deployment to Afghanistan and understood her capabilities in ways that went beyond training evaluations. His expression reflected confidence in her abilities, combined with concern about the political dynamics surrounding the confrontation. Morrison stepped into the demonstration circle with the measured confidence of someone who had calculated the odds and found them favorable. His stance reflected years of combatives training with weight distribution that indicated readiness for immediate engagement. Maya noted the slight forward lean that suggested aggressive rather than defensive intentions. Sergeant Chen, this evaluation will test your ability to defend against a larger, stronger opponent using Army combatives techniques. The scenario simulates conditions where technical skill must compensate for physical disadvantages typical of mixed-gender combat situations. Maya entered the circle with the fluid movement that marked years of martial arts training that supplemented her military combatives instruction. Her center of gravity was lower than Morrison's, providing stability advantages that could offset his size and strength. Benefits if she could control the engagement distance and timing. The crowd settled into the focused silence that accompanied serious physical confrontation. Maya was aware of their attention while maintaining primary focus on Morrison's positioning and movement patterns. She noted the slight tension in his shoulders that indicated preparation for aggressive engagement. Rather than defensive evaluation, Morrison began circling with the deliberate patience of someone confident in his ultimate victory. His movement pattern suggested a strategy based on using his size advantage to overwhelm Maya's defensive capabilities, probably through grappling techniques that would neutralize her speed and technical skill advantages. Begin when ready, Sergeant. Show me how current training prepares female soldiers for realistic combat conditions. Maya recognized the verbal challenge as psychological warfare intended to create doubt about her capabilities, or anger that would compromise her tactical thinking. She responded by centering her breathing and shifting her weight distribution to optimize reaction time for whatever opening Morrison's aggression would provide. Morrison's first probe came as a testing jab designed to gauge her reaction speed and defensive positioning. Maya slipped the punch with minimal movement, conserving energy while gathering information about his timing and preferred attack angles. The exchange confirmed her assessment that Morrison was treating this as a real fight rather than a controlled demonstration. The second exchange escalated quickly as Morrison pressed forward with combination punches intended to back Maya toward the circle's edge where his reach advantage would be maximized. Maya responded with lateral movement that maintained optimal spacing while avoiding the tactical trap he was trying to create. Morrison's breathing remained controlled, but Maya detected slight frustration in his attack patterns as his initial strategy failed to produce the quick dominance he had probably anticipated. His next combination came with increased intensity, forcing Maya into more active defensive measures that demonstrated her technical proficiency to the observing crowd. Sound of impact as Maya blocked a particularly aggressive punch carried across the training area with sharp clarity. Morrison's power was evident in the force behind his strikes, but Maya's technique was absorbing and redirecting that energy in ways that prevented effective damage while positioning her for potential counterattacks. Morrison stepped back briefly, reassessing his approach as it became clear that Maya's defensive skills exceeded whatever expectations had led to his challenge. His next advance came with the grim determination of someone whose reputation was now invested in achieving decisive victory regardless of the methods required. The grappling phase began when Morrison managed to close distance during an exchange of strikes, his superior size allowing him to initiate wrestling techniques that had probably served him well in previous combatives training. Maya found herself defending against takedown attempts that would place her in positions where his weight and strength advantages would be decisive. Maya's response drew on jiu-jitsu techniques that used Morrison's aggression and momentum against him, redirecting his energy in ways that maintained her defensive position, while creating opportunities for reversals. The technical exchanges were happening at speed that challenged both participants while providing dramatic demonstration of high-level combative skills to the assembled observers. Morrison's confidence began showing cracks as Maya's defensive capabilities proved more sophisticated than his attack strategies could overcome. His breathing became more labored as the engagement extended beyond the quick resolution he had probably anticipated, and his movement patterns showed the slight stiffness that indicated growing fatigue. Maya remained fluid and controlled, her conditioning evident in maintaining reaction speed and tactical awareness despite the physical demands of defending against a larger opponent. Her technique was adapting to Morrison's adjustments, staying ahead of his strategic changes while conserving energy for extended engagement if necessary. The psychological dynamic was shifting as Morrison's initial confidence gave way to the grim realization that his opponent was not providing the easy victory that would validate his evaluation thesis. Maya could sense his growing frustration in the increased aggression of his attacks and the less controlled nature of his techniques. Morrison's next assault came with the desperation of someone whose professional reputation was now tied to the outcome of a confrontation that was not developing according to his expectations. His technique became more reckless as tactical considerations were overwhelmed by the need to demonstrate dominance through whatever means necessary. Maya recognized the dangerous escalation in Morrison's approach as his evaluation demonstration transformed into personal combat where normal safety considerations were being abandoned in favor of decisive victory. She adjusted her defensive strategy accordingly, preparing for engagement that would require more aggressive responses to protect herself from increasingly dangerous attacks. The crowd sensed the shift in dynamics as the controlled demonstration devolved into something more serious. Maya heard voices from the assembled soldiers expressing concern about the escalation, but she couldn't spare attention for anything beyond Morrison's movements and her own tactical responses to his increasingly aggressive attacks. Morrison's face showed the strain of extended physical exertion combined with the psychological pressure of failing to achieve quick dominance over an opponent he had expected to overwhelm easily. His attacks were becoming more desperate and less controlled, creating openings that Maya was beginning to recognize as potential opportunities for decisive counteraction. Master Sergeant Kelly moved closer to the demonstration circle, his position indicating readiness to intervene if the confrontation exceeded acceptable bounds. Maya was aware of his proximity while maintaining primary focus on Morrison's increasingly erratic attack patterns and the growing opportunities they were creating for tactical response. Morrison stepped back briefly, his chest heaving from exertion, and his expression reflecting the grim realization that his demonstration was not proceeding according to plan. Maya used the momentary pause to center herself and prepare for what she sensed would be Morrison's final, most aggressive assault when he committed fully to achieving victory regardless of consequences. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across the demonstration circle as Morrison prepared for what both participants understood would be the decisive phase of their confrontation. Maya positioned herself for optimal response to whatever desperate tactics Morrison would employ when his evaluation demonstration became a fight for professional survival. Morrison's final approach began with the coiled tension of someone who had decided that normal rules no longer applied to achieving the outcome his reputation required. Maya prepared to defend herself against an opponent who was no longer concerned with demonstration protocols or appropriate limits on the use of force in what had begun as educational evaluation. Morrison's final charge came with the explosive force of someone who had abandoned all pretense of controlled demonstration. His approach was pure aggression, a bull rush intended to overwhelm Maya's defenses through sheer momentum and drive her to the ground where his weight advantage would become decisive. The sound of his boots on the packed clay carried the rhythm Of desperation disguised as authority. Maya read the attack in the subtle shift of Morrison's shoulders before he committed to movement. 8 years of combat training had taught her to recognize the micro-expressions that preceded violence, the involuntary tells that revealed intention before conscious thought translated into action. She sidestepped with minimal motion, letting Morrison's charge carry him past her position, while she pivoted to maintain optimal spacing. The crowd's collective intake of breath was audible as Morrison stumbled slightly, his momentum carrying him farther than intended when Maya's position wasn't where his targeting had calculated. 310 soldiers watched in absolute silence as their commanding officer recovered his balance and turned to face an opponent who had just demonstrated that his size advantage meant nothing without the ability to make contact. Morrison's face flushed with the kind of anger that came from public embarrassment in front of subordinates who were trained to respect rank above all else. Maya could see the calculation in his eyes as he weighed the political cost of withdrawing against the professional damage of continuing a confrontation that was no longer proceeding according to his script. "Stand still and fight like a soldier instead of running like a coward," Morrison snarled, his voice carrying across the training area with the harsh edge of someone whose authority was being questioned by circumstances beyond his control. Maya's response came without emotion, her tone reflecting the professional calm that had carried her through combat deployments where panic meant death. "Sir, I'm employing standard defensive tactics as taught in Army combatives doctrine. Movement and positioning are fundamental elements of effective combat strategy." The exchange revealed the fundamental disconnect between Morrison's expectations and Maya's capabilities. He had anticipated overwhelming a smaller opponent through aggressive assault, but Maya was treating their confrontation as a tactical problem requiring technical solutions rather than a test of brute strength. Morrison adjusted his approach with the grim focus of someone whose career now depended on achieving decisive victory in front of witnesses who would carry the story throughout the military community. His next advance was more controlled, with footwork that indicated awareness that Maya's mobility was neutralizing his advantages. Maya recognized the shift in Morrison's strategy and adapted accordingly, her positioning becoming more dynamic as she used the full dimensions of the demonstration circle to maintain optimal engagement distance. Her breathing remained controlled while Morrison showed signs of exertion from his failed charge and growing frustration. Master Sergeant Kelly moved closer to the circle's edge, his proximity indicating concern that the confrontation was approaching limits that might require intervention. Maya was aware of his position while keeping primary focus on Morrison's movements and the attack patterns he was developing through trial and error. Morrison feinted left and drove right, his technique showing improvement as he learned to counter Maya's mobility advantages. Maya responded with a defensive sequence that absorbed his initial assault while positioning her for a potential counter that would demonstrate her offensive capabilities to the observing crowd. The technical exchange that followed showcased both participants' training at the highest levels of military combatives. Morrison's strikes carried the power and precision of someone who had maintained competitive edge throughout his career, while Maya's responses demonstrated the fluid integration of multiple martial arts systems that supplemented her Army instruction. Morrison managed to land a glancing blow that rocked Maya slightly, the first successful contact of their engagement, drawing murmurs from the crowd that indicated recognition of his technical competence. Maya absorbed the impact and responded with a combination that tested Morrison's defensive capabilities while demonstrating that she was capable of offensive action when tactical conditions were appropriate. The sound of their engagement echoed across the training facility as other activities stopped and personnel gathered at safe distances to observe what had become the most significant event at Fort Benning in recent memory. Maya was aware of the growing audience while maintaining tactical focus on Morrison's patterns and the openings his aggressive style was creating. Morrison's breathing was becoming labored as the engagement extended beyond the quick resolution. He had probably anticipated when challenging Maya to demonstrate her defensive capabilities. His technique remained dangerous, but Maya detected the slight slowing that indicated cardiovascular stress was beginning to affect his reaction times. Maya's conditioning was evident in her maintained speed and precision despite the physical demands of extended combat against a larger opponent. Her technique was evolving as she gathered information about Morrison's preferred attacks and defensive weaknesses, building toward decisive action when the appropriate opportunity presented itself. Morrison attempted a takedown that would bring the fight to the ground where his weight advantage would be maximized. Maya defended with grappling techniques that used his momentum against him, creating a reversal opportunity that left Morrison off balance and vulnerable to follow-up action. The crowd sensed the shift in momentum as Maya's defensive success began, creating offensive opportunities that demonstrated her capability to control engagement on her own terms. Morrison's expression reflected growing awareness that his demonstration was not validating the conclusions he had intended to draw from the confrontation. Morrison stepped back with the measured breathing of someone reassessing tactical options that were becoming increasingly limited. Maya maintained her ready position, while observing the slight tremor in his hands that indicated either fatigue or the adrenaline surge that accompanied recognition of serious physical danger. The pause stretched longer than previous breaks in their engagement, creating tension among the observers who sensed that the confrontation was approaching some form of resolution. Maya used the time to center her breathing and prepare for what she anticipated would be Morrison's most desperate and dangerous assault when he committed fully to achieving victory. Morrison's next approach began with the coiled tension of someone who had decided that normal constraints no longer applied to achieving the outcome his professional reputation required. Maya read the change in his body language and prepared to defend against attacks that would exceed the boundaries of controlled demonstration. The assault came with overwhelming intensity as Morrison abandoned technique in favor of pure aggression. His attacks designed to overwhelm Maya's defenses through sustained pressure that would eventually create an opening for decisive action. Maya's response required all of her technical skill and physical conditioning to maintain defensive integrity under the barrage. Morrison's desperation was evident in the increasing recklessness of his attacks as controlled technique gave way to the kind of violence that had no place in training demonstrations. Maya recognized that she was no longer defending against evaluation procedures, but protecting herself from an opponent who was treating their confrontation as actual combat with real consequences. The decisive moment came when Morrison overextended. During a particularly aggressive assault, his balance compromised by the force he was putting behind strikes that were becoming increasingly wild. Maya saw the opening and responded with the speed and precision that had been honed through years of training for exactly this kind of tactical opportunity. Her counter came in 3 fluid movements that demonstrated the integration of striking, grappling, and leverage techniques into a devastating combination that used Morrison's momentum and aggression against him. The first strike disrupted his balance, the second created the opening, and the third delivered the decisive action that would define the outcome of their confrontation. Morrison's arm broke with the sharp crack of bone separating under pressure that exceeded its structural limits. The sound carried across the training area with unmistakable clarity, followed immediately by Morrison's involuntary cry of pain as his body registered the damage that Maya's technique had inflicted. The silence that followed was absolute. 310 soldiers frozen in recognition that they had witnessed something unprecedented in military training protocols. Morrison clutched his broken arm while staring at Maya with the shocked expression of someone whose assumptions about reality had just been shattered by undeniable evidence. Maya stood in the center of the demonstration circle, her breathing controlled, and her posture reflecting professional calm despite having just broken her superior officer's arm in front of witnesses who would carry the story throughout the military community. Her expression showed no satisfaction or regret, only the neutral assessment of someone who had responded appropriately to tactical conditions that required decisive action. Morrison's face cycled through pain, shock, and the dawning realization that his evaluation demonstration had achieved exactly the opposite of his intended outcome. Instead of proving the inadequacy of women in combat roles, he had provided dramatic confirmation of Maya's superior tactical capabilities and professional competence under extreme pressure. Master, Sergeant Kelly moved into the circle with the urgent stride of someone taking control of a situation that had exceeded all reasonable boundaries. His expression reflected the grim satisfaction of witnessing the defeat of someone whose arrogance had created unnecessary conflict, combined with concern about the political implications that would follow. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison pushed through, the crowd with medical personnel following close behind, his expression reflecting the complex emotions of a commanding officer whose facility had just become the site of an unprecedented confrontation between ranks that would generate investigations and policy reviews throughout the chain of command. Maya remained in position as medical personnel attended to Morrison's injury, her awareness expanding to encompass the crowd of witnesses and the growing realization that the next few minutes would determine how the military community interpreted what had just occurred. She had defended herself successfully, but the political consequences were just beginning to unfold. Morrison's evaluation had become Maya's vindication, but she understood that victory in the demonstration circle was only the beginning of challenges that would test her capabilities in arenas where technique and training would be less decisive than institutional politics and bureaucratic maneuvering. The broken arm would heal, but the implications would resonate throughout her career and the broader debate about women in combat roles. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training area as medical personnel helped Morrison to his feet, his broken arm immobilized and his expression reflecting the bitter awareness that his demonstration had achieved conclusions he had never intended to reach. Maya had proven more than her individual capabilities. She had validated the training methods and policies that Morrison had sought to discredit. 310 soldiers began dispersing with the quiet efficiency of personnel who understood that they had witnessed history in the making. Their conversations already beginning the process that would transform the afternoon's events into institutional memory that would influence military culture for generations to come. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency around Morrison's broken arm, their quiet professionalism providing stark contrast to the stunned silence that had settled over the training area. Captain Rodriguez, the base medical officer, assessed the fracture with the clinical detachment of someone who had treated combat injuries in multiple theaters, though nothing in his experience had prepared him for treating a colonel injured. During a training demonstration gone wrong, Maya stood at parade rest 10 feet from the medical activity, her position allowing her to monitor Morrison's condition, while maintaining appropriate distance from what was now officially a medical emergency. Her breathing had returned to normal resting rates, but her awareness remained heightened as she processed the implications of what had just occurred in front of witnesses, whose testimonies would shape the official investigation. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison coordinated the response with the calm efficiency that had earned him command of the training facility, but Maya caught the subtle tension in his movements that indicated awareness of the political storm that was about to engulf Fort Benning. Radio communications crackled with coded references to incident reports and medical evacuations, each transmission adding layers to the official documentation that would follow. Morrison's pain medication was beginning to take effect, but his eyes remained fixed on Maya with an intensity that suggested their confrontation had concluded without resolution of the deeper conflicts that had motivated his challenge. His broken arm was evidence of tactical defeat, but Maya understood that the psychological and political battle was far from over. Master Sergeant. Kelly approached Maya's position with the measured steps of senior enlisted leadership navigating delicate terrain between officer politics and enlisted personnel welfare. His expression carried approval for Maya's performance combined with concern about the consequences that would follow once the immediate medical crisis was resolved. Hell of a thing, Sergeant Chun. Can't say I've ever seen anything quite like that in 23 years of service. Kelly's voice carried the quiet satisfaction of someone who had witnessed justice delivered through superior skill rather than institutional authority. Maya's response reflected the professional discipline that had carried her through the confrontation without allowing emotion to compromise her tactical judgment. I defended myself using appropriate techniques when the situation required it. Sergeant Major, the outcome wasn't my choice. Kelly nodded with understanding that went beyond the immediate circumstances to encompass the broader challenges Maya had faced throughout her military career. No, it wasn't your choice. But it was your skill that made the difference when it mattered most. The ambulance arrival created new activity around Morrison's position as paramedics prepared him for transport to the base hospital. Maya observed the process while calculating the timeline that would bring investigators, review boards, and political oversight to examine every aspect of the afternoon's events through multiple analytical frameworks. Morrison's departure on the stretcher marked the end of the physical confrontation, but the beginning of bureaucratic processes that would determine how the military community interpreted and responded to the unprecedented demonstration. Maya understood that her technical victory in the training circle was only the first phase of a much longer campaign for professional recognition and institutional change. Soldiers began dispersing from the training area with the subdued conversations of personnel who understood they had witnessed something significant, but were uncertain about appropriate responses. Maya caught fragments of discussion that ranged from admiration for her technical skills to speculation about the consequences she might face for injuring a superior officer during an official evaluation. Sergeant First Class Davidson approached with 2 cups of water, offering one to Maya while positioning himself where their conversation could proceed, without attracting additional attention from the remaining observers. His expression reflected the complex emotions of someone whose protégé had just achieved vindication through means that would generate significant political complications. "You okay?" Davidson's question encompassed physical condition, emotional state, and strategic positioning for whatever challenges would follow the immediate aftermath. Maya accepted the water, while conducting her own internal assessment of factors that would influence her ability to navigate the investigation and review processes that were inevitably approaching. "Physically, I'm fine. Professionally, we'll see how this plays out through official channels." Davidson's response carried the wisdom of someone who had observed military politics long enough to recognize patterns that transcended individual personalities and specific incidents. "Maya, what happened here today was witnessed by 300 soldiers who saw exactly what Morrison was trying to do and how you responded. That's going to matter more than whatever spin gets put on the official reports." The training area was returning to normal operations as equipment was secured and personnel resumed interrupted activities. But Maya sensed that the atmosphere had shifted in ways that would persist long after the physical evidence of their confrontation was cleared away. The demonstration circle where Morrison's arm had broken would become part of Fort Benning's institutional memory. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison returned from coordinating Morrison's medical evacuation, his expression reflecting the careful neutrality of a commanding officer preparing to manage an incident that would attract attention from multiple levels of military hierarchy. Maya recognized the signs of someone calculating political implications while maintaining focus on immediate procedural requirements. "Sergeant Chun, I need a preliminary statement about the events that led to Colonel Morrison's injury. This will be part of the official incident report that goes up the chain of command within the next few hours." Harrison's tone remained professional, But Maya detected subtle supportiveness in his approach to documentation requirements. Maya's statement was delivered with the precision that marked her approach to all official communications, each word chosen to provide accurate information, while avoiding inflammatory characterizations that could be used against her during the investigation process. She described Morrison's challenge, the escalation of his attacks beyond demonstration parameters, and her defensive response that resulted in his injury. Harrison transcribed her words with careful attention to accuracy, understanding that Maya's initial statement would establish the foundation for all subsequent analysis of the incident. His questions were designed to elicit complete information while allowing Maya to present her actions within the framework of appropriate self-defense under challenging circumstances. The paperwork process continued for the next hour as multiple agencies began their initial documentation of an incident that had no clear precedent in military training protocols. Maya provided consistent statements to each interviewer while maintaining awareness that every response was being evaluated for credibility and consistency across multiple review frameworks. Captain Williams from the Inspector General's office arrived with the systematic approach of someone accustomed to investigating incidents where institutional policies intersected with individual actions in ways that generated policy questions and potential liability issues. Maya recognized the shift from immediate incident management to formal investigation processes. The interview process revealed the complexity of analyzing a confrontation that had begun as authorized evaluation but had evolved into something that exceeded normal training parameters. Maya's responses demonstrated clear understanding of the technical and legal factors that supported her defensive actions while acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the situation. Williams' questions explored Morrison's motivations for requesting the demonstration, the evolution of his attack intensity beyond appropriate evaluation parameters, and Maya's decision-making process as the confrontation escalated beyond controllable limits. Maya's answers reflected professional competence and tactical awareness that validated her actions under extreme circumstances. The sun was setting over Fort Benning as the initial investigation activities concluded with preliminary findings that would require extensive additional analysis before reaching official conclusions. Maya understood that the afternoon's events had initiated processes that would continue for months as the military community grappled with implications that extended far beyond individual performance evaluation. Morrison's injury had been stabilized at the base hospital, but the political fracture created by his failed demonstration would require more complex treatment through institutional channels that were still determining appropriate responses to unprecedented circumstances. Maya had proven her individual capabilities, but the broader questions about women in combat roles remained contested terrain. Master Sergeant Kelly found Maya in the administrative area where she was completing final documentation requirements, his approach indicating that informal leadership networks had been monitoring the official investigation process. His expression reflected confidence in Maya's professional future, combined with realistic assessment of the challenges she would face. The word is already spreading through unofficial channels. Soldiers who were here today are telling the story to units across the base, and it's getting to people who matter for your career development. Kelly's information network provided insights that complemented the official processes still working. Through bureaucratic channels, Maya appreciated the support while understanding that informal validation would need to be supplemented by official recognition if the afternoon's demonstration was going to translate into lasting change in military policies and attitudes. Morrison's broken arm was symbolic victory, but institutional transformation required sustained political effort over extended periods. The evening formation proceeded with normal military routine, but Maya sensed subtle differences in the attitudes of soldiers who had witnessed or heard about the afternoon's confrontation. The looks of respect and the quiet conversations indicated that her Technical demonstration had achieved recognition that extended beyond immediate observers to broader military community awareness. Morrison's absence from evening activities was officially explained through standard medical protocols, but Maya understood that his political influence would continue operating through networks that were already formulating responses to his failed evaluation strategy. The physical confrontation had ended, but the institutional battle was entering new phases that would test different aspects of her capabilities. As darkness settled over Fort Benning, Maya reflected on a day that had begun with routine training, responsibilities, and had concluded with her breaking a colonel's arm in front of witnesses who would carry the story throughout their military careers. She had proven that skill and training could overcome size and rank when circumstances demanded decisive action. The administrative building emptied as personnel completed end-of-day requirements, but Maya remained to finish documentation that would become part of permanent records examined by promotion boards, assignment officers, and policy analysts for years to come. Her career had been fundamentally altered by Morrison's challenge and her successful response, though the long-term implications remained to be determined. The broken arm would heal within months, but the demonstration of Maya's capabilities under extreme pressure had created permanent changes in how the military community understood women's potential in combat roles. Morrison's evaluation had achieved exactly the opposite of his intended outcome, providing dramatic validation of policies and training methods he had sought to discredit through personal confrontation. Maya completed her final report as the base settled into evening routine, her words documenting a day when assumptions about physical capability and professional competence had been tested through direct confrontation and resolved through superior skill rather than institutional authority. The training circle where Morrison's arm had broken would be reset for tomorrow's activities, but the memory of what had occurred there would persist as long as soldiers gathered to share stories of courage under pressure. The official investigation concluded 3 weeks after Morrison's broken arm had healed enough for him to hold a pen. The findings were delivered in a conference room where Maya sat across from a panel of officers whose decisions would determine whether her career advanced or stalled in the aftermath of breaking a superior officer's arm in front of 300 witnesses. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the investigating officer, opened the folder containing testimonies from every soldier who had witnessed the confrontation. Her expression revealed nothing as she reviewed statements that painted a consistent picture of Morrison's escalating aggression and Maya's appropriate defensive response to what had become an actual assault disguised as training evaluation. Sergeant Chun, this investigation has examined your actions from multiple perspectives, including military law, training protocols, and individual rights under combat conditions. The unanimous conclusion of this board is that your response was not only appropriate but exemplary given the circumstances you faced. Maya felt the tension she had carried for 3 weeks begin to dissolve, but her expression remained professional as Colonel Hayes continued with findings that would shape her future and potentially influence military policies affecting thousands of other service members facing similar challenges. Colonel Morrison's conduct violated multiple regulations regarding appropriate use of authority, safety protocols during training demonstrations, and professional behavior toward subordinate personnel. His injuries were the direct result of his own inappropriate escalation of what should have remained a controlled evaluation exercise. The vindication was complete, but Maya understood that official findings were only the beginning of changes that would ripple through military culture and beyond. Her technical victory over Morrison had become symbolic of larger struggles that extended far beyond individual career advancement to encompass questions about merit, opportunity, and institutional fairness. 3 months later, Maya found herself standing before a different kind of audience at the Women's Leadership Summit in Atlanta, her speech addressing civilians whose careers faced different obstacles but similar underlying challenges. The corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and community leaders who filled the auditorium were seeking insights that could help them navigate their own confrontations with assumption and prejudice. The moment Colonel Morrison stepped into that circle, I understood that everything I had worked for over 8 years would be decided in the next few minutes, not by committees or policies or political processes, but by whether I had prepared myself thoroughly enough to perform when it mattered most. Maya's words resonated through the auditorium because they spoke to universal experiences of being tested under pressure by people who held authority but questioned competence. Her story had transcended military context to become relevant for anyone who had faced moments when preparation met skepticism and only performance could determine the outcome. The questions that followed revealed how Maya's experience connected with struggles in boardrooms where women fought for equal consideration, in laboratories where female scientists challenged assumptions about technical capability, and in courtrooms where attorneys overcame preconceptions about professional competence. Through superior preparation and flawless execution. Dr. Sarah Kim, a biotech researcher in the audience, approached Maya after the presentation with eyes that reflected recognition of shared experience. I've never been in physical confrontation, but I've faced that same moment when someone in authority decided to test whether I belonged in my field. Your story reminds me that preparation and competence are our best weapons against prejudice. Maya's response drew on hundreds of similar conversations that had followed her speaking engagements across the country. The physical confrontation lasted 20 minutes, but the real battle was the 8 years of preparation that made those 20 minutes possible. Morrison thought he was testing my reflexes, but he was actually testing my character. The civilian applications of Maya's experience extended into educational settings, where teachers used her story to encourage students facing academic or social challenges. Her example demonstrated that excellence could overcome obstacles when supported by determination and proper preparation, regardless of whether the challenges were physical, intellectual, or cultural. Maya's influence reached high school girls whose college applications reflected new confidence about pursuing engineering, military service, and other traditionally male-dominated fields. Her story provided concrete evidence that barriers could be overcome through competence rather than compromise, inspiring young women to prepare for excellence rather than acceptance. The corporate training programs that incorporated Maya's experience focused on leadership under pressure, conflict resolution, and maintaining professional standards when facing inappropriate challenges from supervisors or colleagues. Her example provided frameworks for responding to workplace confrontation with technical competence rather than political maneuvering. Business leaders recognized that Maya's principles applied to competitive situations where preparation and skill could overcome advantages in resources, connections, or market position. Her story illustrated how thorough preparation could create decisive advantages when circumstances demanded peak performance under extreme pressure. The military impact of Maya's experience continued, expanding through training programs that used her confrontation with Morrison as a case study in appropriate response to authority figures who exceeded proper boundaries. Future officers learned about the importance of protecting subordinates from inappropriate use of rank and position. Maya's promotion to Master Sergeant came with an assignment to the Army's Combat Training Directorate, where her responsibilities included developing policies that would ensure fair evaluation of all personnel, regardless of demographic characteristics. Her experience with Morrison had provided unique insights into the intersection of bias, authority, and institutional culture. The training methodologies Maya developed emphasized individual assessment rather than group assumptions, technical competence rather than physical stereotypes, and performance outcomes rather than subjective impressions. Her programs were being implemented across multiple installations where her approach was improving both training effectiveness and personnel satisfaction. Maya's writing appeared in military journals, where her articles addressed leadership challenges, training optimization, and cultural transformation within institutional environments resistant to change. Her academic approach complemented her practical experience, providing intellectual frameworks for the changes she had helped initiate through direct action. The book proposal Maya was developing would address civilian audiences seeking guidance about overcoming professional obstacles through strategic preparation and tactical execution. Her military experience translated into business contexts where similar dynamics affected career advancement and organizational effectiveness. Speaking requests came from universities, where Maya addressed students whose career paths would be influenced by her example of achieving recognition through merit rather than politics. Her presentations emphasized practical strategies for excellence rather than inspirational platitudes, providing concrete guidance for navigating competitive professional environments. Maya's influence on military recruitment was evident in demographic shifts that showed increased interest from women considering combat roles and leadership positions. Her example had provided visible proof that capability transcended traditional assumptions when supported by appropriate training and institutional fairness. The mentorship programs Maya established connected experienced female military personnel with younger soldiers facing challenges similar to those she had encountered throughout her career. Her network was creating pathways for advancement that had not existed when she began her military service 8 years earlier. Maya's reflection on the Morrison incident emphasized the importance of maintaining professional standards regardless of provocation or pressure from authority figures who confused rank with competence. Her success had resulted from refusing to compromise her integrity, even when facing challenges designed to force exactly that kind of compromise. The universal principles demonstrated through Maya's experience applied to anyone facing institutional skepticism, professional bias, or personal doubt about their capability to achieve challenging objectives. Her story provided evidence that preparation and determination could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable when approached through conventional methods alone. Maya's continuing military service demonstrated that true victory came not from breaking an opponent's arm but from breaking down barriers that prevented capable individuals from contributing their talents to missions larger than personal advancement. Her legacy was measured in expanded opportunities rather than personal recognition. The training facility at Fort Benning continued hosting evaluations where soldiers proved their capabilities through performance rather than assumption, each session reinforcing institutional memory that validated the principles Maya had defended when those principles were challenged by someone whose authority exceeded his wisdom or character. Maya's story illustrates that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act appropriately when circumstances demand your best effort, regardless of potential consequences. Her example shows that preparation creates confidence, competence defeats prejudice, and integrity provides the foundation for excellence under pressure. When we face our own moments of testing, Maya's experience reminds us that the outcome is determined not by the size of our opponents or the authority of our critics, but by the thoroughness of our preparation and our commitment to performing at our highest level when it matters most. The lesson Maya teaches is simple but profound. Excellence speaks louder than rank. Preparation defeats prejudice, and when we stand firm in our convictions while maintaining professional competence, we can overcome obstacles that seemed impossible and create positive changes that extend far beyond our individual circumstances. Her story calls us to examine our own preparation, question our own assumptions, and commit to the kind of excellence that transforms not just our individual prospects, but the opportunities available to everyone who will follow the pathways we open through performance rather than politics. Maya Chun proved that when competence meets challenge, competence wins. When preparation faces prejudice, preparation prevails. And when courage confronts assumption, courage creates the changes that make the world more fair for everyone who has the determination to pursue excellence regardless of the obstacles they face. The training circle at Fort Benning stands as a permanent reminder that strength comes not from size or authority, but from the unshakable conviction that merit will ultimately triumph over assumption when tested by reality. Maya's legacy continues in every soldier who trains there, knowing they stand on ground where excellence defeated prejudice through preparation, performance, and the courage to act when action was required. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.